Good evening. Good evening. I'm Lawrence Zimmerman, treasurer of the Hanover Hebrew Congregation in Hanover, Pennsylvania. Thank you for attending this prayer vigil in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Israel. We're grateful to the spiritual leaders of our central Pennsylvania small congregations and for sharing their words and music of healing, support, and hope. This program is sponsored by the Central Pennsylvania Small Congregation Cohort in cooperation with the Jewish Community Legacy Project, Jewish Community Foundation of Central Pennsylvania, and the Jewish Federation of North America Network of Independent Communities. Tonight's program is especially meaningful after today's historic rally in Washington, D.C. We pray that the thousands of people in attendance not only gave comfort and support to our brothers and sisters in Israel, but that they became a bulwark against the voices of hatred in our country and throughout the world. Our agenda this evening consists of presentations from each of our spiritual leaders. I ask everyone to mute your screens, but feel free to write comments in the chat box. The program should conclude somewhere around 8:15. Additionally, a recording of tonight's program will be made available to you and those who are unable to attend. We will now begin with our presentation. Our first presenter will be Rabbi Herbert Horowitz of Ohev Sholom Congregation, Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thanks for your important words. And the Williamsport Synagogue Center will be having a special rally on Sunday, November 19th from 12:30 to 2. And anybody who wants to join us is welcome to come to the synagogue in Williamsport. It will be a very meaningful program. Cantor will be with me, as well as the Consul General will be online. And we will have a program of song, as well as a program of soul, and also important words that reflect what has been taking place. With those words, I'm just going to reflect some of the thoughts I have with regard to what has happened. Okay, so I can vividly recall playing ball as an 8-year-old boy on the Lower East Side tenement hall with my friend Jeffrey. All of a sudden, he blurted out to me, and he called me by my first name, Herbie, don't worry, American jets will protect Israel. This was in the early 1950s. You see, at that time, the terrorists at that time were known as the Fedayeen in Gaza. The Hamas of the 1950s was attacking and slaughtering kibbutz members near Gaza. It took a ruthless campaign by Colonel Arik Sharon, appointed by David Ben-Gurion, to eradicate the Fedayeen attacks. Fast forward to October 7th, 2023, history repeats itself with much more ruthless efficiency from Hamas. The pain experienced by all of world Jewry cannot match the pain that people in Israel have experienced. The stress and the horror of the 240 hostages of all ages and ethnicities, including 30 different ethnicities, among them Thais, Filipinos, Brazilians, French, many others. And so many Israelis have also has made us all outraged. We must put a human face on the hostages, since most of the world is calling for quote-unquote a ceasefire and de-escalation, playing into the diabolical Hamas playbook. Freeing the hostages should be front and center for all of these groups. Unfortunately, it appears that the hostages, until very recently, are a mere footnote instead of boldly calling, as we did today, in front of so many thousands and thousands of people online as well as present, free the hostages now. My colleagues from the Rabbinical Council of America participated in a solidarity mission this past week. Through that mission, they put a human face on the hostages for all of us to see. I'll quote some of their observations from two of these rabbis. Rabbi Leonard Mataski, former president of the Rabbinical Council of America, observed the following. The CEO of World Mizrahi, Rob Peretz, and his wife Shelley are parents of two Chayalim, Yonatan, who was wounded on October 7th, but was able to walk down the aisle a week later at his wedding. But his brother, Daniel, has been missing since October 7th, and just a few days ago was reclassified as a hostage. It was the first time Rob Peretz was back in his office since the massacre of October 7th, and only the second time he has spoken in person to a group about his family challenge. It was a profoundly emotional presentation and hard to capture everything he said. However, two items were clear: his faith in God and his faith in the Jewish people. The second observation was by one of our other colleagues, Rabbi Yosef Kanevsky, who told us the following. You can hear in the pain but steady voice Rabbi Shmuel Slaki. Two of his sons fell on the morning of October 7th, having driven from their homes near Beersheba to confront the terrorists whom they had heard had entered Kiryas Ilumim. Incredibly, taking the sweeping view, he said, we know historically what it is that calamities befall us is when we turn against one another, when we hate one another. God has given us this opportunity now to fix what we have done and to save ourselves. Asur lahachmitz hasha'ah. We must not waste this hour. You can even hear it if you listen to the voice of a taxi driver on a Jerusalem street who leans out of his window and calls to this distracted rabbi that the light has changed and that the walk sign has lit. There are posters and signs here and there which says, Anachnu ninatzech, we will win. But the poster that is absolutely ubiquitous carries the word biyachad ninatzech, together we will win. It is not as much a proclamation as it is a proposition, not as much a pronouncement as a prayer. Therefore, we must all of us together, biyachad, as one in unity, unequivocally stand with Israel, biyachad ninatzeh, together, most certainly we will win. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Rabbi Horowitz. I might remind us of a story that you historically brought up about Amalek also. And it didn't just start with the Fiddean. I'd now like to introduce to you to the group Rabbi Nina Mandel of Congregation Beth El in Sunbury, Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Horowitz, for your words and for all of the introductions and for all of you being here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Blessed are you, Adonai, the one who will release those held captive. Min hametza karati Yah, from the narrowest of places I called out to Yah. Where will I find the words and the wisdom to know how to speak tonight and how best to support Israel, land, and people right now? Am I the wicked child who only sees complexity and thinks nothing can be done? Am I the wise child who finds both frustration and hope in the nuances? Am I the foolish child who thinks that everything will be fine if we just stay the course and ignore the complexities and nuances? Or am I the child who can only silently weep over all the deaths? Oh, Israel, how should I stand by you? Like a parent who sees your potential and pushes you to reach it, or like the parent set on creating you in their own image, like the grandparent blinded by love and pride, ready to condone and affirm everything you do, or the one quick to point out your flaws and failings. Should I be the sibling, the one who goads and teases, but always has your back when the world turns against you? or the one who grew up in a different generation and cannot recognize your worth. Or perhaps, Israel, you are the lover I cannot leave, who at once enrages and delights, the one whom I should walk away from, except you know my heart and I know yours. And so, my love, oh Israel, I need you to know that I have the capacity to support, stand with, and remember you, and at the same time stand back from you and question you, even critique you, wishing at times you were easier to support. Go ahead, let my right hand wither, let my whole heart crack into a million pieces. Even diminished and broken, I will not forget your hills and steps, your alleys and your cobblestones. I will remain bound to my ancestors who look to you as an anchor for generations, bound to the people who fight to live and worship safely on your mounts and in your neighborhoods. I will not forget the blood shed by those who fought to establish and protect you, nor the blood of those who would conquer you and those who would claim you as their own. In all the quarters, in all the colonies, in all the markets and in all the academies, in all the mosques and churches and synagogues, at all the stations, the fountains, and the cafes. I am bound by every drop of blood sacrificed in holy chambers and holy streets. I will remember not to forget. And when the time comes to clean up the spilled blood and purify this land, to heal all the broken bones and hearts, I will be here to support you and support all who seek to live with you in equity and righteousness. And Israel, if you decide to be like Nachshon, standing at the shores of the sea, and you turn to the roiling waters, hoping that stepping into the unknown will cause the seas to part and lead us down a safe path, or if you decide to turn your swords into plowshares, or you lie down with the lion and the lamb, or you risk sending out the dove to see if it returns with a promise of a new start. If you decide to do any of these things, Israel, I will be standing with you. I will support you. Anani b'merchav Yah, and Yah opened me up to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Mandel. We will now hear from Rabbi Carl Schoper of Temple Beth Shalom of Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello, thank you. And I'm already beginning to see how our messages, how the different styles and content of our messages, even as we have very similar points, they're also very different. My reflections are about how it seems to me it's a lonely time to be isolated Jews in central Pennsylvania, which is why we come together tonight. And for me, that loneliness gets increased by the way I am hearing about the events in Gaza in Israel through the media of central Pennsylvania, the media that much of us listen to in central Pennsylvania. Israel is coming under more and more criticism. And at times I just want to say, tell me what else is supposed to happen. Tell me what is supposed to be done. Hamas is dedicated to the destruction of Israel. Destruction of Israel. Not a two-state solution or a peace settlement. In Hamas's founding document, they state that the Jews created the Freemasons, the Rotary and Lions Clubs, and other sabotage groups, quote unquote, in order to oppress Palestinians with a vicious Zionist invasion. And that the obligation to kill Jews in the fight against Zionism is rooted in Islamic principle. Hamas is a violent, anti-Semitic, fundamentalist, Islamicist, not Islamic, Islamicist organization that glorifies death in the service of achieving its destructive ends. There can be no peace, no two-state solution, as long as Hamas is in a position to undermine all the attempts to get there. Yet in the media environment of central Pennsylvania, this is often not mentioned. They do not explain that if Hamas survives this in any form, they will claim it as a victory. And that claim of victory will be accepted as such throughout much of the Arab world, just as the survival of Hezbollah was accepted in 2006 as a victory for Hezbollah. And then Hamas will use that to continue to grow and do all of this again, only bigger. This is exactly what they say about themselves, and anybody would be foolish not to take them at their word. And yet many of the media outlets in central Pennsylvania, which many of us listen to or view, create false moral equivalence between Hamas and Israel, or blame Israel altogether. I hear of, quote, the extensive suffering in Gaza caused by Israel's campaign against Hamas, rather than the extensive suffering in Gaza caused by Hamas's campaign against Israel. Right? And we have to be clear, the suffering is horrific. It's ghastly. But I hear pundits asking questions like, how can Israel see this as self-defense? But then making no effort to answer the question, leaving it instead as a condemnatory rhetorical question. And in particular, on the BBC, which public radio and television carry, I hear interviewers telling a question to Israelis, such as, why don't you care about civilian deaths? And then the interviewer starts arguing with the interviewee, not giving them a chance to challenge the premise of the questions. And meanwhile, when questioning leaders of Hezbollah, they speak very respectfully. These sorts of reports produce more heat, but cast little light. They produce more heat, but cast little light. They produce hard and harsh feeling, but they provide little insight or understanding. Hearing media reports like this only increases our sense of isolation and vulnerability. And if you, like me, have been hearing media reports like this, know that you are not alone. That is part of the reason why we come together tonight, to support each other and remind ourselves we are not alone. But there is more we can do as well. We can let our media outlets know we hear what they are saying and what they are not saying, especially in regard to public media, the public broadcasting stations. We need to remember that decisions about programming that they carry or do not carry are made locally. This is actually something I know from having been on the community advisory board of WITF. They make the decisions there about what they're going to carry and what they're not going to carry. So if you are consistently annoyed by one particular program, or if you find yourself constantly talking back to your television or radio with counter arguments that they themselves should be providing for more balanced coverage, write them, let them know, and include the program name and day and time of the broadcast. Tell them you want change. We each can also send notes by email to people in Israel, letting them know they are not alone. If you don't know someone in Israel that you can send emails to, I do. Send them to me. You can send them to Temple Beth Shalom, tbshalom@gmail.com, attention.org, gmail.com. tbshalom@gmail. tbshalom@gmail. Attention Rabbi. I know people in Israel who've already said, we will circulate these around so that people in Israel know that they are not alone. Finally, start thinking about peace and what peace might look like. Not only might it help keep you sane, but it might help you prepare for the next round of advocacy. In an editorial in today's Washington Post, Ronald Lauder, who is the heir to the Estee Lauder fortune, writes that Israel has to start talking about peace and a viable resolution to the plight of the Palestinians, even while still making war. I think it has become apparent to many of us that Israel is too important to each of us for us to leave Israel only in the hands of politicians, be they American politicians or Israeli politicians. We must prepare ourselves to speak out more loudly than before for a peaceful, secure Israel, including everything it entails for Israel to be both peaceful and secure. This is a larger question than for tonight, but it is an unavoidable question for which we must prepare. As we read in Pirkei Avot, in the name of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Al Shlosha Devarim Ha'alom Kayem, Al Hadin V'al Ha'emet V'al Ha'shalom. On three things the world exists: on justice, on truth, and on peace. It feels like we are moving towards a moment of truth. Let us strive to move that moment towards peace. Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi Schoper. That was an excellent conclusion to your discussion. I'd like to introduce to you now Rabbi Yosef Zilberberg of Beth Israel Temple in Hazleton, Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Let me just go into the prayer. Echa, how? A whole book of our tradition is called that in Hebrew. In English, it is known as Lamentations. The English term is so inadequate. We are often referred to as a people well acquainted with tragedy and suffering. But the only words I feel now is to turn to the Holy One of Being's question, to Adam, back onto God, and quote Genesis chapter 3, verse 9. Ayeka, where are you? I don't expect evil to miraculously turn to good, but I want a God to smite the evil ones and comfort the brokenhearted. But I don't see that. I don't feel that. But I will not take Job's friend's advice or urge you to curse God and die. It's Job chapter 2, verse 9. The Holy Arizal instructed us to say every morning in our prayers, I take upon myself the commandment from the Torah, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Leviticus 19:17 and 18. Maybe the hardest thing to do every day. That truly makes us Jews. Enough of rabbinic logic. Let me tell you a true story that happened, not to me, but to my sister. She is currently a pediatrician in Columbus, Ohio. A few days ago, as she was closing her office for the day, a Muslim woman with extremely limited English language skills showed up and handed my sister an almost lifeless baby and said to her, help my child. was all that she could say. My sister instantly realized that the baby was extremely dehydrated. She administered a sugar saline drip and arranged an EMT trip to the closest emergency hospital. She instructed the EMTs to continue the drip until they arrived, no matter what. The admitting doctor called to tell her that the baby was stable and would make it. He told her if she had not done what she did, the baby would have arrived DOA. The next day, as she was closing up, a man barged into her office shouting, "You, doctor, you, Jew?" My sister was not feeling great about this. She replied, "Yes, I am a Jew." The man looked puzzled and said, "My wife told me you're a Jew. You saved our baby." I told her she must have been confused. A Jew wouldn't save a Muslim baby. Jews kill Muslim babies. My sister responded, "I took an oath to save life." "I know," the man said. "I was taught Jews kill babies. I was taught wrong." One story. Does it mean nothing? Is not everything one story and the other and another? Which story do we want to tell? Which story do we want to cause? We were called a light unto the nations, Isaiah 42:6. Do we still want to be that? Or would we rather resemble those we rightfully despise? Tears are justified. Rage is understandable. But I want to call on our loving Creator with Ani Ma'amin, I believe. Guardian of Israel, protect what remains of Israel. Do not let Israel, the people who say, Shema Yisrael, every day be destroyed. Bring the captives back. Keep us close to you in the cleft of your rock. Protect us. May we feel your love even in our pain. Amen. El Melech Ne'eman, faithful God without end.
Thank you for your closing prayer, Rabbi Zilberberg. Next, I'd like to introduce Rabbi David Ostrich of Congregation Brit Shalom of State College, Pennsylvania.
Thanks. A few weeks ago, we studied Genesis 1 and the term tohu vavohu, the primordial chaos that God wrestles into order in creation. As Rabbi Mickey Boyden observes, it is with words that God effects this effort. And God began to create heaven and earth, the earth being tohu vavohu, unformed and void, with darkness over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovering over the water. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Words are powerful and can have a positive effect. A week later, however, in the story of the Tower of Babel, we learned that words can also be a source of confusion. Many words have been written or spoken about the Palestinians, about their safety, their needs, their human rights, national aspirations. But are these words sources of light or obfuscations of reality? It might be helpful to consider this simple question: who loves the Palestinians? Who loves the Palestinians? Not Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization that ruthlessly dominates the politics and society of Gaza. It seized power in farcical elections, intimidates and murders local opposition, diverts much-needed humanitarian resources to military use, and uses Palestinian civilians, often children, as human shields. It destroyed industrial facilities and housing left by the Israelis in 2005, and it invokes destructive retaliations from the Israelis by mounting petty attacks on Israeli citizens and agriculture. I use the word petty in the sense that the attacks have no hope of actually freeing the land of Palestine from the river to the sea. They are not petty when one considers what they mean to innocent Israeli victims. Who loves the Palestinians? Not the Palestinian Authority, aka the PLO. The corruption of the PLO is legendary, enriching the fortunes of the leaders while depriving the Palestinian people humanitarian resources, civil liberties, or safety. It was a terrorist organization and now allows terrorist organizations free reign in its territory. Groups that attack Israel and oppress the regular Palestinian citizens who dare not object. It is a failed and abusive government. Who loves the Palestinians? Not Iran or Hezbollah, though the Islamic Republic of Iran and its various terrorist surrogates send lots of money and rhetoric to Gaza. It is to Hamas in Gaza. Rather than helping the Palestinian people in Gaza or in Syria or Lebanon or the West Bank or Israel proper, Iran props up abusive and violent thugs, malevolent actors who violate Palestinian human rights and prevent any kind of progress or prosperity. Who loves the Palestinians? Not Egypt. Notice how Egypt is not letting the Palestinian refugees leave Gaza. Then remember how the blockade of Gaza has been in effect for years. Even though Egypt owned Gaza, then called the Gaza Strip from 1948 to 1967, it never allowed the Palestinians to enter Egypt as immigrants and be absorbed into Egyptian society. Among the ironies here is that a vast number of, quote, Palestinians were really immigrants, or we call them colonists, from Egypt. A prime example being Yasser Arafat, the infamous leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization, who was born and raised in Egypt. Who loves the Palestinians? Not Jordan. Though Jordan was set aside in 1922 as the original Palestinian state, the ruling powers have never been accepting of Palestinians. From 1948 to 1967, they sequestered Arab refugees in squalid internment camps in the West Bank, which they controlled. And when some were allowed to enter after 1967, a bloody civil war erupted, resulted in their expulsion. This brutal time, known in Palestinian lore as Black September, a name made infamous by the terrorist attacks on the 1972 Munich Olympics. Jordan does not love the Palestinians, nor want them in Jordan. Not Lebanon, though the motherland of modern Arab culture, Lebanon is caught between two camps, neither of which loves the Palestinians. One camp is dominated by Hezbollah and other terrorist groups and treats the Palestinians as pawns in its terror campaigns. The other camp is traditional Lebanese society, which has been terrorized by the Hezbollah and PLO for decades. They've endured a continuing civil war provoked by terrorists and have seen their country reduced from a pearl of Arab culture and commerce to a dysfunctional tragedy. Who loves the Palestinians? Not Saudi Arabia. Since 1948, Saudi Arabia has funded Palestinian terrorists in astronomical amounts, while doling out pitiful sums for humanitarian assistance. It has also refused to welcome Palestinians into their society, allowing only limited numbers of those willing to endure abusive domestic servitude. Who loves the Palestinians? Not the United Nations. While presumably focusing on relief and human rights, the UN turns a blind eye to the corruption and criminality of Hamas and other terrorist organizations. UN personnel ignore terrorist activities, diversion of humanitarian funds, ignore the building of these enormous bunker systems in the tunnels. They fund and print textbooks which foment hate and therefore prevent peace and progress. When generations of Palestinian children are raised to hate Israel, what real chance is there for a two-state solution? The UN is an enabler of a terrorist state that reigns in Gaza and is actively involved in making sure that Israel never has a partner for peace. Who loves the Palestinians? Not the human rights groups. In traditional Arab society, most women are not free to pursue education, employment, sexuality, empowerment, or even their own fashion choices. The situation is even worse in Islamist-dominated societies like Iran or Afghanistan, where morality police act with impunity, carrying out whatever misogynist outrages they choose. In terms of LGBTQ plus rights, there are none. Gays and lesbians are hounded, imprisoned, raped, and even murdered. The idea of gender reassignment is not even on the agenda. Freedom of speech and assembly are absent, as is real voting. If elections are held, any district that does not overwhelmingly support the terrorist regime suffers violence and repercussions. When human rights groups insist on indigenous autonomy, they do not secure human rights for the Palestinians. Rather, they consign them to homegrown tyranny and oppression. Ironically, the best chance for Palestinian freedom and economic and social viability lies with Israel. The Arab citizens of Israel have more freedom, prosperity, and human rights than almost anyone in the Arab world. The continuing violence, however, creates suspicion and hate for all Arabs and all Muslims. It sabotages their full participation in Israeli society. It torpedoes any hope for a Palestinian state or a single state where Jews and Arabs live together. By allowing and encouraging terrorism to dominate, all the supposed friends of the Palestinian people doom the Palestinian people in dozens of ways. They may speak words of concern and support, but too much of it is babble, and there is little love. As we pray for peace, and we do, let us also pray for clarity, for truth, and for wisdom.
Thank you for that enlightening presentation, Rabbi Oscar. I'd now like to present Cantor Marilyn Okashi of Congregation Beth Israel in Lebanon, Pennsylvania.
Good evening. In our weekday liturgy, we include many bakashot, or requests, both personal and collective. Traditionally, we include a bakasha at the end of the weekday Torah service for all in distress, captivity, oppression, or darkness, to be delivered and relieved speedily, in words found in the Siddur of the Amran Gaon from 9th century Babylonia. We say this together, not silently. It reminds us of the needs of those in captivity, both physical and mental, and reminds us that we are one family. We feel one another's pain and long for one another's deliverance. In times of trouble, we turn to communal prayer. Words of shared intention spoken aloud have the power to calm and focus us, to enfold us in a sense of community, to assuage the sense of isolation that can engulf us in traumatic circumstances. Although I'll not be able to hear you singing with me because of the limitations of Zoom, I will see your mouths moving and feel that camaraderie as we send tendrils of hope and love across the miles to those in distress. Breathing together, we strengthen our hearts, turn back fear, and affirm our connection as one family, united in hope and love and faith. Please join me in Achenu. We are all one family, whether we abide on the sea, whether on dry land or the sea. May the all-present have mercy upon them and bring them forth from distress to comfort, from darkness to light, and from subjugation to redemption.
בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה. המקום ירחם, ירחם עליהם ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה, ומאפל עליונה ומשעבוד לגאולה, השתה בעגלה ובזמן קריב. המקום ירחם, ירחם עליהם ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה, ומאפל עליונה ומשעבוד לגאולה, להשתה בעגלה ובזמן קריב. אחינו כל בית ישראל, אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנתונים בצרה, בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה.
Thank you, Cantor Okashi. I thought that was very inspirational, that singing. I'd now like to present Ronnie Cook of Congregation Sons of Israel in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, for a few words.
I have a prayer for the state of Israel. Rock and champion of Israel, please bless the state of Israel, first fruit of the flourishing of our redemption. Guard it in the abundance of your love. Spread over it the shelter of your peace. Send forth your light and truth to those who lead and judge it, and to those who hold elective office. Establish in them, through your presence, wise counsel, that they might walk in the way of justice, freedom, and integrity. Strengthen the hands of those who guard our holy land. Let them inherit salvation and life, and give peace to the land and perpetual joy to its inhabitants. Appoint for a blessing all our kindred of the house of Israel in all the lands of their dispersion. Plant in their hearts a love of Zion, and for all our people everywhere, may God be with them, and may they have the opportunity to go up to the land. Cause your Spirit's influence to emanate upon all dwellers of our holy land. Remove from their midst hatred and enmity, jealousy and wickedness. Plant in their hearts love and kinship, peace and friendship, and soon fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation. Let them learn no longer ways of war. And let us say, Amen.
Right. Thank you, Ronnie, for that lovely prayer. I'd now like to call upon Cantor Ramon Tassat of Agudas Israel Synagogue of Hazleton, Pennsylvania, in singing the Haktikva. If you can, I would appreciate it if you could rise if able. Oh, I'm sorry. I did skip. Rabbi, is Rabbi Rothstein available?
No, he wasn't able to get out of DC.
Okay, then we will continue with Cantor Ramon Tassat of Agudas Israel Synagogue in singing Hatikva. Please rise if you're able.
כל ולבב פנימה נפש יהודי הומיה ולפתי מזרח קדימה Hain letzi ציון מירושלים, להיות עם חופשי מארצנו, ארץ ציון בירושלים.
Thank you very much. Entered to some. This concludes our.
Lawrence,
Yeah.
Rabbi, your friend Rabbi Zimmit, if you have some time, would like to say something.
Rabbi Zimmit, if you would, please join us with some words.
Maybe he's not here now. Okay.
He's muted.
Oh, can you unmute him? Rabbi Zimmit, can you unmute yourself?
Bottom left corner. There's a microphone. Click on the bottom left corner of your screen, and when you do, you're going to see a microphone. If there's an X over it, click on that.
Can the host unmute him?
I asked him to unmute. He might just have walked away from the computer.
Oh, he's there. We can see him. I don't think he knows how to unmute. He's looking at his screen as if he's trying to figure it out.
If he's on a tablet, he has to touch the tablet, by the way, to make the controls appear.
Either that or he may have to just take the mouse and start moving the mouse to make the screen active. Or if he has a little touchpad, move the touchpad.
Usually a host can unmute somebody.
I can only ask him to unmute, and I've asked. I don't know why it's not coming up on his end.
Okay, Lawrence.
I don't see him on the list of participants.
Is that Rabbi Zimmit coming on?
He's here.
Okay.
So on, he can't figure out how to unmute himself.
Okay. Well, this concludes our program. We're so very grateful to have the spiritual leaders of our discussing their inspiring words tonight. Our prayers go out to the hostages, the injured, the soldiers, and the entire people of Israel. Thank you for attending. Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. Thank you. And this concludes our presentation.
Thank you to all the presenters for your wonderful, moving music and prayers and words of inspiration. Thank you.
Have a good night. Am Yisrael Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai.
I do.
This is the prayer for the tefillah L'Medinat Yisrael that you have in your prayer books. This version is by Cantor Saul Zim. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo. Arech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu, Hagen Aleha Be'evrat Chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukkot Shlomecha. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo, Ushlach Orecha V'amitecha L'roshea Sareha V'yotzea V'taknem Beitzah Tova Milfanecha V'taknem Beitzah Tova milfanecha, milfanecha. Chazek edidei miginei eretz kodshenu, v'hanchileim Eloheinu Yeshua. Varateret nitzachom ta'aterei, v'natata shalom b'haaretz, v'simchat olam liyoshveha. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo. V'nomar Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All of you, I'm glad I somehow, through troubleshooting the other programs, I was able to close enough of them that you suddenly reappeared.